crimes on opposite sides of the country. Were they connected?
This happened in the mountains east of LA, way up in the mountains. This guy, dressed as a delivery man, goes up to this home. He knocks on the door. When the guy who's supposed to take the package comes to the door, he pulls out a gun and he shoots 3 or 4 times. We then learn that the victim was a lawyer. Angelucci died right there at the scene.
Just 8 days after Marc Angelucci was murdered, another crime took place, about 2,800 miles away in suburban New Jersey. It seemed like an exact copy. The delivery man, the gunshots.
I was notified that a shooting had occurred at a federal judge's residence.
A man had come to their door to drop off a package. That man was not a FedEx employee.
Police telling us that that gunman was dressed up as a delivery man when he rang the doorbell here at their home.
Who would want to hurt the judge? Who would want to hurt someone in her family? Her college-age son sustained a gunshot wound to the chest
that ended in the murder of her son Daniel and the wounding of her husband Marc.
Daniel, being Daniel, protected his father, and he took the shooter's first bullet directly to the chest. And to everyone who is keeping my family in your thoughts, thank you. It has lifted us during our darkest hours.
The suspect who targeted a federal judge,
attorney Roy Den Hollander, he was found dead from an apparent.
The gun found at the scene is similar to the gun used in yesterday's shooting and may be a match based on ballistics. They discovered files near the body that appear to be research about not only Judge Salas, but others, and that includes Chief Judge Janet DeFiore.
Hollander was notorious for filing frivolous lawsuits targeting women's rights. Hollander self-published a book about his life in which he attacked Judge Salas as a lazy and incompetent Latina judge appointed by Obama.
Hollander also wrote of his hatred of his own mother and other women and raged about female judges.
The bitter memoir is dedicated to Mother, may she burn in hell. Also in the book, he outrageously calls an ex-wife a money-grubbing prostitute. Hollander revealed he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was determined to take out some of his enemies before he died.
Salutations, Serene Eminence here. It's a pleasure to officially conclude the Judgeship execution subsector of the Courthouse Homicides series. This is the 11th Courthouse Homicides installment, and by the end of this episode, we shall have officially contended with approximately 31 casualties, including 7 defendants, 5 judges, 5 court officials, 5 wives, 3 attorneys, 3 civilians, and 3 offspring. Thankfully, the targeted attack upon U.S. District Judge Esther Salas did not result in intended assassination. However, a sinisterly threatening shadow is insidiously encroaching upon the mantle of judgeship, as well as other officers of the court, due to frustrations with the failings of the justice system as a whole. And unfortunately, this deadly discontentedness is closing in on the civilian population, resulting in ceaseless, senseless acts of violence against innocent individuals, as in with today's ironically cruel case, wherein the anti-feminist assailant managed to solely commit acts of androcide when in actuality his self-proclaimed antagonists were that of womankind. Assure to tune in to previous Courthouse Homicides episodes to garner deeper insight into how the inoperable mechanics of the judicial system intermingles with individualized circumstances, causing for judges to execute their spouses, court officials to execute defendants, defendants to execute court officials, an attorney to execute his family, and defendants to self-annihilate.
I've committed 19. What about you?
Today's wine selection is 19 Crimes, The Warden, a currant and cinnamon-laced Shiraz blend, especially curated for revolutionaries and outlaws alike. This full-bodied libation was concocted in commemoration of those of whom cleverly communed with cunning convicts in the name of founding a new and improved nation, wherein both the incarcerated and their respective custodians embodied transformative roles operating in tandem to officially establish and expand the nation, brick by blessed brick. Our navigational itinerary entails the following: the death and respective motive to execute Attorney Angelucci, the judgeship of Esther Salas, the law passed in her slain son's honor, the Jeffrey Epstein connection, the assailant's life mission and interrelated motive, the death of Daniel and wounding of his father, narrated by Judge Salas herself, soul wounding similarities betwixt serial killer Ed Kemper and the suspect, Serene Eminence insights regarding generational trauma transference and the eradication of intergenerational bondage, and finally, future series foreshadowing.
I think it's really important to challenge first the areas of the law that explicitly discriminate against men. First of all, it's easier because you don't really have to prove it's discriminatory. It's right there. And secondly, you can't really change other things in that field unless you change the law, because all the people do is just keep referring to that discriminatory law, and that's their excuse for discriminating. So there's a number of reasons why I think it's important to do that.
The FBI believes Hollander's violent rampage may have started last week in California. There, a 52-year-old men's rights lawyer, Marc Angelucci, was shot and killed, also apparently by a man in a FedEx or delivery uniform.
Not knowing that there was an assassin at the door, when he got Marc from his office, he saw the gun, turned, tried to run away, and was shot in the back 4 times.
Angelucci had also argued a case involving the question of drafting men only for the military.
Women now have the ability to serve in combat zones and in special forces, but will they soon be part of the draft? The House Armed Services Committee has voted yes.
The case of NCFM versus Selective Service is a federal case filed by the National Coalition for Men on behalf of some of its members who are male and of draft age, and it challenges the Selective Service's requirement that only men register for the draft. And the challenge is based on the equal protection clause of the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution.
Angelucci was killed when he answered his front door. He was shot by a gunman posing as a FedEx delivery man. The attack happened in broad daylight about 4 in the afternoon.
On Thursday, July 23rd, homicide detectives received information regarding additional evidence that tied the suspect, Roy Den Hollander, to the murder of Marc Angelucci. Detectives determined on July 7th, 2020, Hollander arrived at the San Bernardino train station and rented a car. On July 11th, 2020, Den Hollander drove his rental car to Marc Angelucci's residence, where he shot and killed him. At 4:03 p.m., Twin Peaks deputies responded to a report of a shooting at 22400 Glenwood Drive. Upon arrival, deputies found the victim, later identified as Marc Angelucci, unresponsive and suffering from apparent gunshot wounds. Medical aid also responded, and Angelucci was pronounced deceased at the scene. Hollander immediately fled the area in his rental car. After the murder, Den Hollander boarded a train at Union Station in Los Angeles and left California to get to New Jersey, where he was able to shoot Judge Esther Salas' husband and son. That's how he was able to do both in the span of a week before in upstate New York. And this report also shows security camera proof. There he is. at San Bernardino train station. And there he is, again, traveling through Union Station, Los Angeles.
Jealousy kills.
Like Hollander, Angelucci was a lawyer who specializes in men's rights. The two men were longtime associates, but reportedly had a falling out. Harry Crouch, president of the National Coalition for Men, says Hollander was insulted when the organization refused to hire him as their lawyer.
And Hollander called me up. He was very angry. He was swearing a lot. Basically threatened to come out to the West Coast and kick my you-know-what.
What was it like the day that you were sworn in as a federal judge, especially for your family to see that?
It was a day what I dreamt about, and it came true, and it was a moment in time I'll never forget. I first became a United States magistrate judge in 2006, and I was the first Latina to attain that position in the District of New Jersey. And then in 2011, I was blessed to become a United States District Judge, the first woman, Latina woman, to be appointed a District Judge in New Jersey. So those were 2 days I'll never forget. And my mother was there for the United States Magistrate Judge swearing in, and she had Alzheimer's at the time. The fact that she's there and I have photos of her with me, that was a special one, indeed.
It's so wonderful.
I am the youngest of 5. My mom left my dad when I was 5 years old and came to New Jersey. She left California on a red-eye flight and never looked back. She raised the 5 of us on her own, and we all went to college. I was the first in my immediate family to go to law school, and Mom is the reason. She's my hero. She had a mantra that I live by, and in Spanish it's, Esther, tú no eres mejor que nadie, pero nadie es mejor que tú. Translation, Esther, you're not better than anyone, but no one is better than you.
That is an incredible mantra.
Oh, it's one to live by. The idea that, you know what, it doesn't matter whether it's someone holding a door for you, you thank them, right? Or it's, meeting the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which I had a great pleasure to do. I treat the Supreme Court justices the same as I would treat anyone who I come in contact on a daily basis. And that's the way you live life.
We need more of that right now.
We do. And I think more kindness, more love. That's what we need.
Judge Salas is the first Hispanic woman to serve on the federal bench in New Jersey. She was nominated to serve as a district court judge by former President Barack Obama in 2010 and has presided over a number of high-profile trials, including the fraud trial of former Real Housewife Teresa Giudice and her husband Joe. More recently, Salas has presided over a lawsuit brought by Deutsche Bank investors who claim the company made false and misleading statements about its anti-money laundering policies and failed to monitor high-risk customers, including convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
I am holding it together because I know that's what Daniel would want me to do.
My family has experienced a pain that no one should ever have to endure. And I am here asking everyone to help me ensure that no one ever has to experience this kind of pain. We may not be able to stop something like this from happening again, but we can make it hard for those who target us to track us down. As a federal judge, I took an oath to administer justice without respect to a person's race, gender, or economic status. As I speak to you today, I can honestly say that I have worked tirelessly to uphold that pledge. As federal judges, we understand that our decisions will be scrutinized, and some may disagree strongly with our rulings. We know that our job requires us to make tough calls. And sometimes those calls can leave people angry and upset. That comes with the territory. And we accept that. But what we cannot accept is when we are forced to live in fear for our lives
because personal information like our home addresses can easily be obtained by anyone seeking to do us or our families harm. Unfortunately for my family, the threat was real, and the free flow of information from the internet allowed this sick and depraved human being to find all our personal information and target us. Currently, federal judges' addresses and other information is readily available on the internet. In addition, there are companies that will sell your personal details that can be leveraged for nefarious purposes. In my case, the monster knew where I lived and what church we attended, and had a complete dossier on me and my family. At the moment, there is nothing we can do to stop it, and that is unacceptable. My son's death cannot be in vain. Let's commence a national dialogue. Let's work collaboratively to find a solution that will safeguard the privacy of federal judges. Let me be clear and tell you firsthand, this is a matter of life and death. And we can't just sit back and wait for another tragedy to strike.
Are you planning on returning to the bench?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This man took the most important thing in my life. I can't let him take anything else. That I'm going to strive every morning to be the best person that I can be. My son gave his life for his father and I have to look at that and say, what a gift.
District Court Judge Esther Salas is the driving force behind Daniel's Law. It gives legal protection to the personal information of active or retired judges, prosecutors, or people in law enforcement. 3 years ago, a lawyer angry about one of Salas's rulings showed up to her North Brunswick home, shot her husband, and killed her son, Daniel.
This gentleman, because of open source information, was able to track my every move. He knew my church, he knew my husband's office, he had a list of Daniel's baseball games.
It is sad and unfortunate that this network came to be because Daniel was lost. But if we prevent one tragedy like this from happening in the future, we've done something worthwhile.
Prominent legal figures from around the state gathered to talk about Daniel's Law at Stockton University yesterday and described how New Jersey's team of redactors pulls information from public-facing websites.
If you have moved and you've got a deed out there that shows you live in a new house now, that may be discoverable. We can help to block that. We can help to redact that residence information for you.
About 8,000 people in the legal and law enforcement communities have signed up to protect their personal information out of 15,000 people who are eligible. Retired assignment judge Julio Mendez served as a moderator and said Daniel's Law is a good start to fix a massive concern.
The internet is a cesspool, and the dark web is constantly gathering additional information. So it's almost impossible to keep up.
But for some, Daniel's Law raises a larger First Amendment question. Does blocking addresses of certain people interfere with the freedom of speech? The discussion came one day after State Attorney General Matt Platkin declined to get involved in a case where a journalist allegedly published the address of North Brunswick's police director.
Transparency and accountability are lofty goals and good ones, but risking people's safety in their own homes, let alone their courtrooms or walking to their cars at night, is not the price that we should be paying for it.
I'm all for, First Amendment rights, speaking and protesting, but do it at the courthouse. And I'm all for appealing if indeed there's a ruling that I may have erred on.
Without Daniel's Law, Judge Salas worries about the safety of other judges and what that means for American democracy.
I think it is vital for democracy. I think we need to protect our judiciary. We need to send a strong message to would-be attackers that in America, we do not tolerate this type of intimidation. We only need to look to history, Nazi Germany, Hungary, Venezuela, the toppling of democracies that they probably never saw coming.
A similar bill protecting federal judges was signed into law last year by President Joe Biden. But it doesn't protect the 30,000 or so judges at the state or local level. That might have to be addressed state by state, with New Jersey's Daniels Law possibly serving as an example for others.
With today's bill signing, I believe, symbolically, Daniel is doing what he did for his father and I. He is protecting the lives of countless judicial officers. In the seconds before his death, Daniel asked me to keep talking to him because he loved talking to me. Well, Daniel, on behalf of all New Jersey judges, I thank you, son, for all you have done, not just for Daddy and I, but for all judicial officers.
Thanks to the New Jersey legislature and Governor Murphy, we now have the protection of Daniels Law. Daniels Law prohibits the disclosure of residential addresses of certain covered persons on websites that are controlled by the state, county, and local government agencies. These covered persons can include active and retired judges, prosecutors, and members of the law enforcement community and their immediate family members who reside in the same household. To help carry out the work of protecting these individuals, the Office of Information Privacy was created within the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs.
The recently, and I use that term lightly, Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire bad boy turned pedophile, coming up on charges, and suddenly he in jail, in a maximum security jail. We have a government-run agency called a jail and a police department that somehow let a man either A or B get murdered in a maximum security prison, which tells you that the world that we live in is not the way we think, that there really isn't protection, that people can be bought off, which was exactly Jeffrey Epstein's principle. There's money to buy somebody off. You can pay for anything. Everyone has a price. But that was his thinking. And obviously, with the fact that he's dead in the jail cell, everybody does have a price because somebody richer, somebody more powerful came in and said that prick needs to die. So he definitely was murdered. He was taken out.
She was involved with the sentencing of a very notorious gang member in Newark. And most recently, she was handed the case that involved Deutsche Bank and its handling of high-risk clients, including Jeffrey Epstein.
Judge Esther Salas was assigned a pretty critical case linked to Jeffrey Epstein.
This case is involving Deutsche Bank investors who are suing the bank as a result of some of the Deutsche Bank reporting about how they did a lot of business with Jeffrey Epstein, despite the fact that they knew he was likely victimizing young girls. They knew he was using his accounts in order to fund his sex trafficking ring and many of his illegal various business exploits. He was committing a litany of financial crimes. And they didn't care. Or the New York State Department of Financial Services just fined them $150 million for their complicity with Epstein. Investors who read that report sued them. This case was assigned to the judge only 4 days ago. Now this is happening. It's received a lot of scrutiny online. And no matter what this is, and we won't drop it, if it has nothing to do with Epstein, judicial assassination is the sign of a dying republic. When the judges get killed for delivering justice against criminals, then you live in a fake regime.
Danny was the love of our life from the moment he was born. We struggled to have a baby. I had 4 miscarriages, 3 before him, 1 after him. From the moment that little boy came to this world, he was the center of our universe.
But their world turned upside down on July 19th. Federal Judge Esther Salas and her husband, Marc had just spent the weekend celebrating Daniel's 20th birthday with friends at their home in New Jersey, when everything changed in an instant. July 19th. Walk us through that day.
2 weeks ago, my life as I knew it changed in an instant, and my family will never be the same. A madman, who I believe was targeting me because of my position as a federal judge, came to my house. Our family had just finished a weekend celebration in honor of our son, Daniel Marc, his 20th birthday. Daniel always wanted to spend his birthdays with his dad and me, so he asked that we host a party for a few of his Catholic University of America friends. Because of the pandemic, Marc and I, my husband and I, had some concerns. However, we thought we could adhere to safety guidelines, and we agreed to allow his friends to come spend the weekend. The weekend was a glorious one. It was filled with love and laughter and smiles. As Daniel's last friend departed on Sunday, we decided we'd give Daniel a pass on his usher duties. When Marc and I returned from church, Daniel was upstairs sleeping, and we decided to give him a little rest. But as the afternoon progressed, it was time to clean up from the weekend festivities. Daniel and I went downstairs to the basement, and we were chatting, as we always do. And Daniel said, "Mom, let's keep talking. I love talking to you, Mom." And it was at that exact moment that the doorbell rang. And Daniel looked at me and said, "Who is that?" And before I could say a word, he sprinted upstairs. Within seconds, I heard the sound of bullets and someone screaming, "No!" I later learned that this monster, who had a FedEx package in his hand, opened fire. But Daniel, being Daniel, protected his father, and he took the shooter's first bullet directly to the chest. The monster then turned his attention to my husband and began to shoot at my husband, one shot after another. Marc was shot 3 times. One bullet entered his right chest, the other his left abdomen, and the last one in the right forearm. And then I saw Danny lying perpendicular to the door, holding his chest. And I saw Marc on his hands and knees at the porch. He had crawled to the porch to try to get the license plate or something of the person. I just got on the floor and I just saw my son. And I know at some point Marc was screaming, "Call 911," and I tried to do that. And I lifted his shirt and I saw the bullet hole. And Marc managed to crawl back, and we were both just watching it fade away.
Fortunately, Marc survived.
I think the hardest injury right now is to his heart. They were so close. He talks about Danny as his best friend.
The FBI identifying disgruntled lawyer Roy Den Hollander as the alleged shooter. He was found dead 1 day later. Do you recall any dealings with this man?
Vaguely, vaguely. It had been months, if not a year, when he last appeared before me. And
had he ever threatened you in any kind of way?
Nothing. There was nothing. You know, my husband and I sat for an FBI debriefing. I know that he hated me because I was a woman. He hated me because I was Latina. And that was the source of hate. That was, you know, what I had done was I had the nerve to become a judge.
Judge Salas told 60 Minutes what the FBI found in a locker.
They found another gun, a Glock, more ammunition. But the most troubling thing they found was a manila folder with a workup on Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor.
Yes.
Roy Den Hollander was an American lawyer who specialized in men's rights activism and anti-feminism. Den Hollander graduated from the George Washington University Law School in 1985 and earned an MBA from the Columbia University Business School in 1997. Den Hollander had worked as a private investigator for Kroll Associates in Russia. In 1993, he addressed the Kremlin. In March 2000, Den Hollander married a woman he had met in Russia, but the two separated 9 months later. He would later accuse his former wife of having ties to Russian organized crime. Den Hollander was also a men's rights activist and self-described anti-feminist who had previously been known for filing unsuccessful lawsuits against ladies' night promotions at bars and nightclubs, as well as suing Columbia University for offering women's studies classes.
I brought 3 lawsuits. They're all in federal court. They're all in the Southern District Court of New York. Each one of the lawsuits emphasizes fairness for men's rights. And each lawsuit was thrown out of the court. The judges in the court simply read the complaints in the lawsuits and they said, oh, this is my belief is, they said, oh, this is a lawsuit concerning men's rights. It's a lawsuit fighting for men's rights. Let's get rid of it. Let's give these bums the rush out of court. The federal government holds secret hearings. The guy's not there. The guy doesn't know about it. The guy can't submit evidence. And those secret hearings find the American citizen responsible.
Our great country was built on one idea.
The key to the Declaration of Independence and the amendments to the Constitution is that people will be treated equally.
But one lawyer has a simple plan for standing up for the oppressed.
Stop giving females preferential treatment. If they want equality, let's give them 51% of the worst of the society. Then they'll change their tune and they'll start whining, where's the kitchen?
For nearly a century, feminists have slowly eroded the rights of American men. But no more. Because no matter who you are, Roy Den Hollander will fight for your rights. If you're a guy.
I will fight for the rights of any guy. Doesn't matter. It's a guy, I'll be glad to fight for his rights.
Because Roy knows how hard it is for men in this world.
I am speaking for a lot of guys who are too scared to come out and say, yes, I'm tired of being pushed around. I'm tired of these feminists walking over my rights.
But this exhausted man has somehow found the strength to strike back at the heart of feminism.
I'm anti-feminist, but not anti-female. The reason I'm doing this may simply be because I'm a Libra. Is what is going on fair?
Roy asked, and the courts answered.
The courts dismissed the case completely.
But Roy took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, who handed down a landmark ruling.
Supreme Court said basically get lost.
But a difference maker never backs down. Roy knows there is only one rational solution left.
Let's get 100,000 armed guys in D.C. I'm willing to go down with you guys. Let's go.
This is attorney Roy Den Hollander, and law enforcement officials say he was found dead. Shot wound near Liberty, New York this morning. Those who knew him described him as an oddball attorney, and in his writings, he raged against women and joined anti-feminist groups on Facebook. And he voiced anger at federal judge Esther Salas before he allegedly went to her New Jersey home yesterday. Hollander appeared in front of the judge last year in a fight over whether the military draft can be men only. The suspected killer later called the well-respected judge, quote, a lazy and incompetent Latina judge appointed by Obama. Hollander also wrote of his hatred of his own mother and other women and raged about female judges.
Hollander self-published a book about his life. Can you believe the bitter memoir is dedicated to Mother, may she burn in hell. Also in the book, he outrageously calls an ex-wife a money-grubbing prostitute.
Feminists like Roy's ex-wife.
No, she wasn't a feminist. She was a prostitute. But she knew to use feminist tactics, techniques to get what she wanted.
I'm sorry, what was that first part?
Prostitute, and former mistress to a Chechen warlord. So she was smart.
But Roy was smarter.
Hollander revealed he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Investigators are exploring whether he was determined to take out some of his enemies before he died.
In addition to the upstate search, the FBI searching Hollander's Manhattan apartment for evidence. The FBI and U.S. Marshals are in the process of warning judges and others in the legal community who in the past crossed paths with Hollander in case he had been keeping some kind of hit list.
And our team covered stretches to the area of the Catskills where, as we say, the suspect's body was found. News 4's Adam Cooperstein covering that for us near Liberty. Adam?
Yeah, David, at this rural police station 140 miles away from that crime scene in New Jersey, you've got the FBI, U.S. Marshals, local law enforcement all gathered right now searching that suspect's vehicle. And we're told the evidence they found is revealing. Here's a look from Chopper 4 this afternoon. It's about 15 miles north of here near a campground where law enforcement sources say the body of Roy Den Hollander was discovered this morning. Those sources say the gun found at the scene is similar to the gun used in yesterday's shooting and may be a match based on ballistics. They also say they discovered files near the body that appear to be research about not only Judge Salas, but others. And that includes, we've now learned, Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals and State of New York, Janet DiFiore, who's also the former Westchester District Attorney. So that evidence, along with Hollander's history raging against women, being a men's rights attorney, has authorities confident connecting him to that awful shooting yesterday at the doorstep of Judge Salas in New Jersey. And on top of that, if he had other targets or what may have caused him to allegedly take his own life, that right now remains unclear.
I mean, the media are framing the MRA killer as a misogynistic murderer, despite the fact that he didn't shoot one single woman. However, he did shoot 3 men, killing 2 of them before then killing himself, adding himself to the body count of men. In fact, the MRA kill was fueled by his grudge against the female district judge, Esther Salas, but because he was a coward, he decided to murder the son and injure the husband instead.
As a whole, there are a lot of men facing very serious issues in our society right now, and when they talk about them, they're often met with derision. I have reaped the benefits of always having strong men backing me up. I care about these issues because I care about them, and I think the family is a microcosm for society. I look at my family and my own life, and I can't help but think what our society might look like if it were filled with men like those in my family. And while there are always elements of self-responsibility that must be emphasized when it comes to these matters, anyone who cares about liberty should care deeply if the state is putting policies into place that hurt people. You should care about people when they're hurting. You should especially care when the government is hurting people. Single white men are the most likely demographic to be a mass murderer. That men make up the majority of violent criminals and victims. So if we want to actually stop misogyny and sexism and other fringe groups that are preying on hurting, disaffected people, the best thing we can do is start to show up and show sympathy and hopefully even solutions.
Although not exact replicas in terms of modus operandi nor kill count, the resultant murders in both cases stemmed from similar places of spiritual origin. Hollander and Kemper shared the mutual experience of being verbally and physically demeaned during boyhood, invoking for them to devote a substantial part of their lives to avenging emasculation. In addition to slaying a slew of surrogate targets, Edmund Kemper also managed to murder and mutilate his very own mother, which he deemed to be the source of his internalized spiritual castration.
Had an upbringing that was some have called dysfunctional. Okay, parents divorced when I was young. My mother started drinking heavily. She was working to raise 3 kids. We were not being cooperative about it. She drank more. She punished us harder, probably out of desperation. So character sets were being developed at that point. Rather than me going to Boy Scouts and getting achievement badges, I was not going to Boy Scouts and not getting achievement badges. I was finding devious ways to get around the rules of the home. Because the whole home life, I watched it deteriorate from what typical kids on the block were doing. I wanted to get away from my mother because I was dreaming, thinking, fantasizing murder all day long. I couldn't get it out of my head. She and I couldn't battle with her because I was very intimidated by her. She's 6 feet tall, she weighs 2 1/4, 225 pounds. She's not a fat woman, she's just this great big woman who I was terrified of. She had verbal capabilities you wouldn't believe. I used to watch her field strip grown men in emotional little contests. And when they'd get to a point where they wanted to smack her, then she started attacking them on beating women. Oh, slap the woman around, you know. And then she'd toy with them on that. And I'd watch these guys dance around the room having fits, knocking out windows, punch a hole in the door, and stomp off. And she could control people like that. I'm sitting there watching that in awe from the one point of view and in terror from the other. I grew up with this stuff. She did that to my dad when they were always battling before the divorce. I'm not trying to put on her what happened to the girls or to her. But I'm saying there was a lot of psychological involvement there. One time I turned around shrieking and she hit me in the mouth and the little keeper on the clasp flew off, little silver buckle thing. And she smacked me, this thing breaks off on my mouth, right? And she hits me across the face with this belt and says, "Shut up, the neighbors are gonna think I'm beating you." I'm looking at her, what? You know? I'm not supposed to cry out, which is a natural reaction to these great red welts that are going on me. I was a little shit. I got rude downstairs. She took me upstairs and beat the hell out of me.
Generational trauma transference and the eradication of intergenerational bondage. Disclaimer. Serene Eminence's spiritual explications are not abdications of responsibility on behalf of the perpetrators, but instead are intuitive avenues formulated to explore and expose the overarching principalities operating through the soul along its quest towards calibrated reconciliation. This chronicle of casualties, including the 2 male murders, the solitary male wounding, and the self-annihilation of the assailant himself, was inevitably set into motion during the accoster's early years. For the inception of his misogynistic worldview and his resultant internalized self-hatred shamefully stemmed from malicious matriarchal imprinting. In direct reference to a personal manuscript composed by the assailant, one of his earliest maternal interactions unfurled as follows. "What's for dinner?" he asked. More than once, not getting an answer, she spins around in a flash with that screwed up face of unrepentant anger and yells, "Don't bother me. I wish I had listened to your father and never had you." For about the next decade, that was her favorite incantation of meanness. Guess she was hoping, like all witches, that I would disappear. But it didn't work, unfortunately. This experience alone offers insight into his initial impressions of the female figure and how this shaped his ideologies regarding feminism and his respectively subjugated role as a male in a suppressive society. In delving deeper, this preliminary perception proceeded to operate as a proof that he continued to prove repeatedly as a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. As subsequently, he successively contended with the spiritual manifestation of this internalized childhood wounding throughout his interpersonal interactions, vocational endeavors, and quite frankly, his relationship with himself. Fighting for equality is most certainly admirable, as disparities undeniably exist within multitudinous sectors of our shared multidimensional reality, and resultant frustrations are manifested in innumerable forms, ranging from subtle microaggressions to outright egregious acts of violence. Mr. Roy Den Hollander essentially existed as an unstoppable man on a mission to uphold men's rights in an effort to protect the sanctity of manhood. Yet he was precariously guided by the deeply distressed boy within, whose soul growth was stunted, whose manhood was maligned, whose foundation was fragmented and fundamentally hijacked by the detrimental trauma transferred to him during his most tender era of development. If we haven't reckoned with or fully reconciled with the noxious energetic output stemming from the input of unstable parental dynamics formulated in our formative years, this toxic frequency shall attempt to emulate itself through our intimate partnership dynamics and often extends out into our relationship with the world at large as a means by which to equalize itself through our interactions. If we haven't reckoned with or fully reconciled the noxious energetic output stemming from the input of unstable parental dynamics formulated in our formative years, this toxic frequency shall attempt to emulate itself through our intimate partnership dynamics and often extends out into our relationship with the world at large as a means by which to equalize itself through our interactions. We must confront the suppressive spirit within and understand its true derivation as to truly eradicate the essence of intergenerational bondage. The deep-seated rage harbored within shall be repeatedly misplaced, and your authenticated soul mission shall inevitably be shrouded in shame, thus ushering you forth unto the throes of a sorrowful alternate life trajectory, a solemn route riddled with tricks and traps that perniciously affirms and metaphysically holds you ever so close to the negative energetic signature that has essentially hijacked your soul. For this internalized turmoil energetically reverberates and spiritually refracts unto unsuspecting souls that inconsequentially trigger your innermost wounding, which contentiously leaves innumerable innocent casualties in the conflicted crossfires. Future series foreshadowing. The futuremost series shall be centered upon increasingly more complex cases involving clandestine executions ushered forth by solidified hidden agendas. Keeping in mind that intelligence agencies exist as integral aspects of a parallel shadow government, operating as entities that work in tandem with elected political bodies. In the interim betwixt officially uploading the aforementioned case coverage, I shall share brief coverage of executions that have transpired within the criminal justice sector, respective to the deaths of probation officers, bail bondsmen, correction officers, plus much more.